I don't need to open the podcast. I don't know why that's a force of habit where I just like say okay once I start recording. It's dumb. Well, hello everybody. Howdy. It's this is PoliSciFiPod.
Yes.
The political science fiction podcast where we discuss political science topics by using science fiction as lenses. This one's a little less science fiction though.
A little less science fiction than like wee bit pop culture-y and like it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, a bit more history, honestly.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, there will be some comments, but I mean, also in the sense that this one's a political science topic, it's about like this week it's like about like how we develop narratives about certain people and how those narratives can be misconstrued for better or for worse, and sometimes give certain characters a bad shake. But yeah, maybe this is actually gonna. I don't want to call this a series because I really only have like two ideas like this. One of them's this one, and the other's on the Knights Templar. But which you could also do probably other episodes on this if I had them in me. But I mean, it'd be a lot of it'd be a lot more research to do those.
I mean, we could honestly be doing like 3 episodes. Like 3 episodes by itself on the Knights Templar at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, one episode on like the idea of what I'm talking about in this episode.
Okay, fair enough.
In the sort of same vein. Yeah, and the other ones that I think I could do would be like, I don't know, like voodoo or the Apache, and like I'd need like people that know more about this about it than me, just to get like proper, because I think I know what I'm on about those ones, but I'd need like probably some like almost certainly some people that are from those cultures to go talk to these. I very much, when I'm constructing the ones I've very much done the white people ones.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, what, the white person doesn't know a whole lot about voodoo?
I've read books and like listened to people talk about it. I think I'd formulate some basics of an episode, but I to get the minutia.
Mm-hmm.
I need like those people, and also just respecting. But I think I do know the basics of what, I mean, you'll get the idea of what this sort of episode's about as I go on to it. But yeah, so this episode, as I mean, you've known it from the title, you read the book, you clicked on the video, you found the podcast, you found this. It's about Rasputin, rah Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen. Yeah, that's actually, honestly, weird thing. The premise of this episode is like how we portray him in like, maybe not so much the historical record, but in like media and like storytelling and like different stories that have been told about him. But honestly, as far as like portrayals of Rasputin, I actually find the Boney M song Rasputin to be a pretty reasonable portrayal of him, despite one major inaccuracy. Like, I actually think that's a very reasonable, like, portrayal of the idea. I mean, the big inaccuracy is that lover of the Russian queen, probably not. It's not entirely a 0% chance, but if we had any hard evidence, the Russians probably would have told us about it. Or the Soviets probably would have told us about it. That's just kind of where I stand on that.
Sure.
Yeah, the big central premise of this episode is that, like, no one's really in this to give Rasputin a fair shake. Or at least, like, no real historical factions big fans of the guy. There are people that are, like, as like I'll do, and it's going to sound like at some points where I'm being, like, really generous to them, which really not really, it's just, it's hard. I mean, my big things is I don't know that I consider like his crimes to be as bad as like the people standing around him in this story we're about to tell. And I'm not saying you'd like this guy if you knew him in person, but he's not like the villain of the story. He's maybe a bad guy, but he's not the bad guy. If that makes sense. Why don't you what do you know about our good friend Gregori Rasputin? Just as like a because you didn't end up doing yeah. What can you tell me about him?
So basically, that's all I know. That he was a faith healer for a very prominent Russian, I guess, emperor, the last emperor of Russia, and then he got killed, and I don't exactly know what happened between then. So he was the emperor to. He was like the priest to Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia. And then Nicholas essentially went off to fight World War One, and then Rasputin had like control over Russia while the person was away, and then at some point in time he was killed after claiming power. I don't know exactly what he did in power that made him get hated so much, but I'm assuming there's a reason.
Yeah, we're gonna clear that up a little bit here. Yeah, a lot of basics there are true. Some of the specific, the big misunderstandings. Like, I mean, I'm not like saying this to like, we're not shaming Cody for not knowing stuff. By the way, this is just I did that as an exercise to like talk about what we're gonna be talking about, because this is about like how people view him, and it's I mean, this is a part of this is like getting like the views of the average person who maybe doesn't know everything about him or has maybe done like a quick search or whatever. But yeah, so Grigori Rasputin is a was a Russian peasant born in 1869.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, he was born. He's a Siberian pet. He was a Siberian peasant. Starts out normal. Actually, not literate from an early age. When he gets into his late 20s, he runs away and leaves his sort of abandons his wife and children and goes to go on like a religious pilgrimage. Eventually, he goes to a monastery. He learns to read at like the age of like 28.
Sure.
So, yeah, he learns to read at like the age of 28. He goes through I guess you could maybe call it a midlife crisis. I don't know. But I mean, actually, is that middle of his life?
Well, I mean, he died at the age of 47.
60%.
Yeah, that's a little bit higher, but like, I mean, he was also assassinated, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you say
he couldn't have known.
midlife crisis, you should probably take it on the basis of the average age span of the time, which was probably 70s.
It's Russia, so it's not as like.
Okay, fair enough.
Tsarist Russia is not the best place for a medieval peasant, although he was getting money. I think if like he hadn't been killed, I could see him getting another 10 years. Yeah. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I don't know that he had any major pre-existing health problems.
But I mean, he's also a noble at this point in time, and I feel like if you're a noble, you're gonna like your life expectancy is gonna be at least somewhat higher than that of the average peasant. But
he's never a noble, but he does get close up and gets like some of those privileges, and he's like hanging out with a bunch of them all the time. Like on one hand, he's gonna get a lot better treatment. Actually, that is relevant because he's getting better treatment. He does actually survive an earlier assassination attempt.
Mm-hmm.
I think in 1915, like a year and a half before.
Yeah.
It's during the First World War, but not. Yeah, he dies in 16. So I think it's like 15. They try to assassinate him once, and his surgeon does a good job, and he's able to pull through. But yeah, I could see him getting. Yeah, I think him getting to his 60s isn't out of the question. And I mean, he is also, although he is toward the end, he was getting more into alcohol.
Hmm.
So, and he was also maybe at a bit more of a risk of getting something like syphilis. I don't know. We'll say it that way. Um, it's possible that hits him in his 50s and he goes sort of quick, but it's not a 0% chance of happening. He gets big into religion in his late 20s, and eventually on his travels he gets a reputation as a faith healer, and he also like develops his like he eventually does return to his family, to his credit, and like they notice that like when he gets back he is quite different. He's known for like a really intense gaze with eyes of shining gold, I believe is how Boney N puts it. Yeah, he's quite his presence is widely considered to be quite enrapturing.
Hmm.
He can be kind of intense, but in a way that like a lot of people seem to trust, like be comforted by, and like particularly I think maybe in a way that like nobility aren't particularly used to, which maybe comes from because he is a common man. He is a peasant, and that comes with some cultural differences between him and the noble people he will end up interacting with later toward the end of his life. Once we get into the 1910s, certainly. This eventually, so he gets a talent for faith healer. He develops this really intense passion for religion and conversation. He could teach the Bible like a preacher, again, as the song says. Like I said, that song's actually a pretty reasonable portrayal of him for the most part. I think that's actually pretty fair. It's maybe doesn't. It's maybe not hard enough on him, but I don't think it's entirely out of out of left field. But he eventually, through his journeys, he gets some contacts, and eventually he meets Tsar Nicholas and Alexandra and Tsarina Alexandra in the mid 1900s, sometime after their son Alexei Romanov is born. And something that's not clear to the people at the time is that Alexei has hemophilia. This is a really closely kept secret, and very few people will know about this at the time. This is something that comes out and this explains a lot of things in retrospect. But I mean, if you're reading primary sources, you're very much not going to understand a lot of things that are going on, which we'll get into a bit more. But he meets Alexei, and he's for whatever reason, Rasputin's able to possibly impact Alexei's cost of living, not cost of living, state of quality of life. He's able to calm Alexei when he's having some episodes. Hemophilia is I'm not a doctor, but the basics are if you start bleeding, you don't stop. You can your blood doesn't, normally if you scrape your knee, it'll stop bleeding pretty quickly. It's not the case with Alexei. If he bumps,
It's a clotting disorder. It has some weird connotations with nobles. I don't know how it was introduced, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with some of the noble houses, royal houses, I should say.
Yeah, you can develop a history of it. Yeah, it can be genetic. Neither of his parents seem to have it, but I think there is some indication that it does exist in his family.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what he was sick of, but the Tsar's brother George, George, George Romanov or Georgy Romanov, whatever the Russian equivalent of Georgie is. He is quite sick throughout his entire life. So although I'm not sure if he has hemophilia. But yeah, I think Georgie also dies in the 1910s before Alexei, before the end of the Roman Tsarist Russia. But yeah, Rasputin is able to positively impact Alexei. No one's like entirely sure why this is. We are going to, for the sake of this podcast, just kind of dismiss the idea that that some people have, is that he actually has magic powers. Yeah, we're just gonna blow by that. Including a little bit of the suggestion of that in the fucking Encyclopedia Britannica, which does imply at one point that Rasputin has hypnotic powers. Although, I mean, I assume they mean in the sense that, like, hypnotism is a real thing, but hypnotism's a real thing, but it's not a real thing. It's a thing that happens, it doesn't have nearly the ability that people think it does. Yeah, so we're just assuming he doesn't actually have magic powers. Some people believe there's a couple possibilities. Being able to calm Alexei down is medically relevant. And by all accounts, that it does seem to be a thing he can do. Being able to calm him down
Sure.
will help him in like episodes. So, and if you have someone who is a calming presence, that can be very helpful in helping him not get.
Well, I mean, like if we're looking at it from like a hypnosis standpoint, people entering into a deep sleep would theoretically slow the heart rate down.
Maybe I'm just not sure if there's yeah. Go ahead.
But then again, I'm not a faith healer, and I'm also not a doctor.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's any primary sources that say he performed hypnotism. And I mean, by primary sources, I mean like obviously like documents from people who Rasputin interacted with that say, yeah, he hypnotized me, and like that being like a credible thing. I'm just not.
And apparently, he's stopped people from giving Alexandri
Yeah, that's the other thing. Alexei's doctors were prescribing him aspirin, which is a blood thinner, which isn't necessarily good. I think this maybe stops at some point, but like I think particularly later. But I mean that is just something he does sort of like shoo the doctors away at points, and it is important to note that like this is the 1910s. Like he's getting the best medical care that he could possibly get in theory, but I mean not all of the best medical practices are hashed out at this point. And also just like hemophilia at this point does not have a effective treatment. That has not been discovered at this point in history. So anything they're doing isn't necessarily going to be the most effective, even if they are doing something correct. Yeah, it might just like Rasputin might have just as much ability to help Alexei as those doctors. And yeah, and if in the alternate universe where none of these people die, Alexei probably doesn't live a long, healthy life. He does almost certainly die young at some point, maybe into adulthood, I think, but not. Yeah, he could go somewhat. He could go at some point. Now, this is unknown to the general public, who we just see have, like, as far as the general public is concerned, and even like a lot of royalty, is that okay, the Tsar and the Tsarina are just having this weirdo who by the way is just like constantly like flirting with random women. He is known to have had relationships, like sexual relationships with his followers, and is definitely caught like going into brothels throughout history, throughout his recorded time the St. Petersburg. Um, so yeah, he's this really shady character, and again, he's also a religious firebrand. His beliefs are not typical of the Russian Orthodox Church. He does have something of a belief that, yeah, you're not sexual repression, which is common at the time, is not necessarily godly. So he is more encouraging of having more open sexual relationships. And also, if you're a more conservative Orthodox figure, you're not necessarily going to like him. And the Romanovs actually have several favorites in the Russian church. Most of them are to an extent firebrands. Even a guy who we're going to talk about a little bit later, Eliodor, is what they call him. He's very much considered Rasputin's rival in a lot of ways, and he is also a political firebrand or a religious firebrand who's got like a very like a bit out there version of his religion. And this just seems to be how the Romanovs like their religion. They like them a little bit more excitable and with a lot some maybe more quote unquote radical beliefs as far as the church is concerned. And this does disturb some of the more conservative members of the court and high society, other parts of high society. Yeah, on the inside, they're keeping this guy because he's helpful toward their son, who is having like a horrible disease. There are several times where he gets very close to death. It is not pleasant. If you read the details, it'll break your little heart. Eventually, this a bunch of members of the high society, large some of Nicholas's family and friends, his nephew-in-law, a cousin, and a member of the aristocracy, or the Duma, which is a bit of a national assembly they had in the early 1900s after the 1905 revolution. They end up tricking Rasputin into coming over to one of their houses, and at that point they murder him. And that's the end of that story.
Yeah, apparently he drank 3 glasses of poisoned wine, and then they shot him with a revolver because apparently the wine wasn't doing the trick.
So here's the thing. Okay, we're gonna talk about 3 people when we're talking about how people view Rasputin. The first 2 are pretty characters I've already sort of introduced. I've already mentioned sort of, and the other one's gonna be a bit out there toward the end of the episode. Okay, so the one we're gonna talk about in relation to this is Prince Yeltsov. He's married to the Tsar's niece, and is known to be and is more conservative than a lot of guys. Him along and his co-conspirators are his co-conspirators, the Tsar's cousin, the Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, and a member of the Duma, Vladimir Purishkevich. And they're the guys that kill Rasputin. Yusupov, in particular, has a habit of play acting, and there are some inconsistencies in his version of the story. And his version of the story is the one that gets a lot of airplay because he writes a memoir in 1928 about how he did it, or about how he says he did it. And he reports something like he tries to poison Rasputin with a bunch of poisoned tea cakes. Rasputin eats them, and nothing happens. At that point, they end up shooting him, and then dumping him in the river after he survives the shooting. That's not necessarily like that's contradicted by a few things. His co-conspirators don't repeat this exact thing, and also they do an autopsy on Rasputin. It seems like the gunshots just killed him. He doesn't see. My understanding is he doesn't seem to have drowned, and they didn't find any poison in the system. Now, there's a couple explanations for that. Some of them involve him the prince being more of a liar. Some of them less. It's possible he may have tried to poison him. It's also possible that like he asked for poison and like the guy just is like, yeah, sure, here's some poison and handed him some baking powder. That's just possible. It's possible like someone told him he gave him poison but didn't, or that they didn't do the right amount, or that the baking of the tea cakes neutralized the poison, something of that effect. But I mean, the central of the issue here is that like none of these guys are like trained murderers, so it's possible they just tried to kill him and it didn't go as well as they had planned.
Or they're trying to use it to discredit him.
I mean that's also a part of this.
Yeah.
Like they like there's absolutely some like because they're trying to like the reason they kill Rasputin is a bit like what I said about okay, he's a little bit more radical than that. Part of it is also a propaganda thing. People like notice that this is a thing. Like after the 1905 revolution, which happens after the Russians lose the Russo-Japanese War, there are some changes in Russia, and part of it is that that Nicholas II has to give the Russian people a better freedom of the press. So there's a lot of tabloid stuff going on here. Okay, there not only is Rasputin doing some objectively maybe shady, sex pesty things, but that's also getting exaggerated by the 1910s political press. So it's actually quite embarrassing for the royal the royalty, to have Rasputin interacting with the royal family so closely. And I think like on some level, like these guys that kill him, they're like to an extent, Nicholas's families and friends who might just be generally concerned that this random peasant preacher who's with dubious religious beliefs is just taking advantage of their close friend. Like that's just a possibility here. Like these aren't like random people killing him. An earlier assassination attempt in the 1913 I mentioned is a bit more of a random person that's being killed. Like that ends up being confirmed to be like orchestrated by Rasputin's political rival Eliodor. But yeah, so that's a bit more random. But this murder is by like Nicholas's friends and family. They could be acting out of concern, and you need to like state your case that like, yeah, no, we had to kill this guy. He was being like manipulating the king and the Tsar and Tsarina. We have to get rid of him for the good of the nation. And he's also being like a political embarrassment, so he's like making us all look bad. And he is a contributing factor to the downfall of the monarchy, because not only do like the nobility not like Rasputin, the peasants don't like him because he's just like this random guy who's just drawing undue influence on the reigning monarchs of your country. And these guys end up like not Yusupov gets like house arrest. Is how he ends up getting punished for this. The other two get sent to the front because World War I is going on during this. And they're just like, and Nicholas is very much just like, oh yeah, you want to kill people, do you? Well, why don't you go shoot the Germans if you want to shoot people so badly? Although I think one of them actually is put on the lines with against the Ottomans. Wait, no, it would have been put on against the Ottomans. I think one of them. I don't know which one. Or I don't remember which one. Yeah, so yeah, this is the first part of the story. Yusupov is very much will come along in the 1920s after he ends up fleeing Russia in after the 1917 revolution, which will eventually see the first a liberal government put in charge, and then the communist government. And Yusupov will have to flee, and he will spend the rest of his life living in and around Paris, living off some diamonds which he had, and like artwork. So, yeah, and he writes a book in 1928 talking about how Rasputin's like this demonic guy who's like evilly, like, yeah, dude, this guy was like an evil preacher who was like manipulating my my uncle and my wife's uncle. I had to do it. It was a matter of protecting him. But that actually funny story. Movies about Rasputin sort of end up getting filmed immediately after he dies pretty well. Literally, like, there are 2 films about Rasputin released in 1917. Neither of them in Russia, but both silent films. Yeah, one's The Fall of the Romanovs, which is just like a historical drama. Actually, the Fall of the Romanovs is the second one I was going to talk about. Fall of the Romanovs is starring our good friend Eliodor, who is our other character who gives us a lot of the popular confession of Rasputin. Eliodor is another religious firebrand who is close to the Romanovs. He talks. He ends up getting in opposition to Rasputin as he gets more powerful. I think Eliodor, I think, is one of the guys that first originates the lie that Rasputin is sleeping with Alexandra, the Tsarina, and he stars in a movie in 1916 after he is exiled from Russia because he gets on the wrong end of a political feud with Rasputin. Because that's really the crux of it. He's gotten more power than Eliodor. And the second there's a problem, the guys who don't like Rasputin end up going. Which is another reason why why they end up killing him, is because if you publicly antagonize him, you're going to get shunned by the royal family. And I think in one case there was a guy that was killed. I forget who. Yeah, so yeah, Eliodor literally makes a movie in 1917, like a year, like I was gonna say before Rasputin is cold in the ground, but they dunked him into a Russian river, so I don't think he possibly could have been warm when they put him in the ground. They literally had to dump him into the river through a hole in the ice. So yeah, that's a part of the issue here. It also should be noted that Eliodor's a bit of a sack of shit. Like, another thing that the Tsar is less famous for, but should be more famous for, is his rabid anti-Semitism. Have you seen the movie Riddler on the Roof?
Fiddler on the Roof?
Or the musical, I suppose. It's also like a stage musical.
I think way back in the day for school, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, that's where I saw it. Yeah. Okay, so Fiddler on the Roof, for those of you who don't know, is a play, like a play about like these Jewish Russian peasants. And I'm not the basic plot's not really important for this, but at the end of the movie, they all get expelled from their homes. One guess is who's doing that. Our good friend Tsar Nicky II. So he's the one expelling. He does several pogroms against the Jews. He's responsible for translating the Protocols of the Elder of Zion into Russian, which is I mean, if I said it was a book about, have I mentioned this in the podcast before? But if I said it was a book about how Jews eat babies, I would only be slightly exaggerating. Almost literally a book about how Jewish people eat babies. And Tsar Nicholas II translates into Russian.
Uh-huh.
Eliodor is also a rabid anti-Semite too, so yeah, he's a big part of that story. At this podcast, we're about Tsar Nicholas II and his anti-Semitism. We'd be talking a lot more about Eliodor. I could go into the specifics, but the I think you get the gist when I say this is a book that claims that Jewish people kidnap Christian children and bleed them dry and drink their blood. Like that's what the book's about. There's other bits in it, but that's I think if like you'd have to the entire book would have to be just entirely out of left field to like not let that be the focal point of the idea. So yeah, he's a bit more about that part. But yeah, he ends up getting on the bad side of Rasputin, and he gets expelled. He gets chased out of Russia, and eventually Eliodor ends up in New York City, in New Jersey, and New Jersey and New York, and he ends up dying when he passes away. I think he converts to some American religion, baptism, Baptist. I think he becomes a Baptist, and he ends up being a janitor for the rest of his life after a while. So yeah, he actually and Eliodor plays Rasputin in that movie. It's super weird. The film is lost, so you can't see it though. And that's one of two The Fall of the Romanovs, and I think the other one's just called Rasputin. Neither of these films are particularly accurate. It's the other one. I'm losing the title here. Oh, here we are. I can get the title here. But it's more like it's very different. It's not particularly accurate, and they couldn't have possibly known everything in 1917 because like I said, there's a lot of like the entire thing about Alexei, which very much explains why it was so hard to expel Rasputin from the court. Rasputin the Black Monk is the name of the other movie. Yeah, and it's that other movie also produces insists that Rasputin is seducing the various princesses of the like the Tsar and Tsarina's daughters, of which they had four, all of whom are older than Alexei. Alexei's the youngest of the five children, and is the last child that the couple have. This again, if there was a smoking gun that said like any primary document that the Soviets were able to acquire that said that Rasputin was having I guess you call it an affair, or like was molesting one of the Russian of the Tsarist princesses. If the Soviets had found it, they probably would have told us, and they do not. Soviet historians do not care for Rasputin. He's just not a big. Yeah, obvious. Like he's just like, yeah, look at this weirdo they were hanging out with and who got to make decisions, which is a thing I haven't really talked too much about. Rasputin made a bit more decisions. I wouldn't say he was ever the ruler of Russia in any real sense, but the Tsar ends up going directly to the front. Yeah, essentially, like Rasputin's really close to Tsarina Alexandra the entire time, which is kind of where that rumor comes from. And he does kind of swing his political power around for a bit. He does sort of have the ear of the monarchs. But yeah, on to like the thing we're talking about. Later on, there are some more movies. Like we do get several more movies about Rasputin, or like involving Rasputin. Next one I want to talk about. There's a few other ones. None of these movies are particularly accurate. The one we gotta talk about real quick is an MGM film from 1932 after Yusupov's book comes out, called Rasputin and the Empress. Does seem to be a film. Yeah, I know I told you to. This is the funny part. I know I told Kobe to watch a bunch of make believe film, like actual make believe films for this, and I didn't. And I haven't talked about a single one of them yet. I ended up falling down a rabbit hole about the other movies. Yeah, Rasputin and the Empress. It's just it's big. Sort of what it sounds like. It does sort of imply that the Tsar and Alexandra are like a couple. This one does know at this point. It is out at this point that that Alexei has hemophilia, and this is how he's able to get into get into the royal throes. But why this is significant, and this is kind of an interesting story. So the movie includes two characters called Prince Chegodiev and Princess Natasha, which are allegories for Prince Yusupov and his wife Irina. And in the plot of this film, the character after Irina, Natasha, is the one who recommends that Rasputin gets put into the graces of the Romanovs. And in the course of the movie, Rasputin sleeps with Natasha, and Yusupov sees this film. He gets an inkling of this film existing and doesn't much care for it. He sues MGM, who produces this film, and on behalf of his wife Irina, because because he knows they're betraying him, because in the movie Chegovidas, the Felix allegory, kills Rasputin. But in the movie, he's doing it because Rasputin has sex with his wife, which was not notably the case in real life. So Yusupov sues MGM because of this betrayal, and I'm not sure. I think he maybe wins this. Oh yeah, he does get a settlement. Oh, he gets an out of court settlement for like about. Oh yeah, he got like they got like out of English court and American court about like $300,000 in 33 money, I think. That might have been adjusted for inflation. That seems a bit high, but yeah. So why that's interesting. You know how in front of every film they have a thing that says any characters, any association between these characters and people existing in real life is entirely coincidental?
Yes.
This is why that's a thing. Yeah, this is the first case where someone had like pulled this shit, and after this is why they put that at the end of the movies, because of literally this.
Yeah, I'm actually.
This is when this pops up because this helped.
Going through the disambiguous Rasputin and popular culture here on Wikipedia, and there is a weird amount of stuff that he's apparently in now. Like, he's in Hellboy, which kind of makes sense considering it's Hellboy and it's set in the 40s. He was in the Grim Adventures
Speaking of Hellboy, I'm going to cut you off.
Billy and Mandy.
Because this is relevant. The third guy I was going to talk about is Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy.
Okay, fair enough.
Because Rasputin's the villain of the first Hellboy arc. And as far as I can tell, I would have sworn this is something that was invented earlier. But I think Mike Rasputin, like, this is the first example of someone using Rasputin as like an evil like an actual demonic sorcerer, like as like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, of course, what we've established is like, yeah, Rasputin's like out there, but he's not like a Satanist or a pagan. He's a sort of a kooky faith healer. I don't like. He's very. He's got like a really wild hairdo and an intense stare, but I mean, the only real difference between Rasputin and a lot of American faith healers is that he is less clean shaven. A lot of people do between Eliodor, I think particularly Eliodor, they start putting out this idea that he's like a satanic person, which I mean, to an extent, that's just posturing. It's just like a thing that sometimes more excitable Christians say about other Christians who disagree with them. Like you're not just disagreeing about like factors of your religion. You're literally influenced by the devil. This is something that gets brought up against people with like atypical Christian beliefs all the time. Yeah, and eventually that gets extrapolated to like, okay, what if Rasputin was actually a demonic sorcerer? This is also like the idea that's put forth in the Anastasia movie, which makes even less sense because yeah, that's just a movie about like implies that Rasputin killed the Romanovs, even though he was like literally their best friend.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that's an exaggeration to say like him and the Tsarina are basically best friends. Like it makes very little sense for him to be like the avatar of the destruction of the Romanovs. As for Hellboy, I think the weirdest thing about that one, yeah, I don't know. Like I just don't necessarily know how respectful it is to like claim people are demon worshippers when they're just like, again, this is an exaggeration based off like people that don't really like him very much.
Apparently, in Team Fortress 2, there's an achievement named after Rasputin, given for being shot, burned, bludgeoned, and exploded in a single life. He's also in Assassin's Creed 2. A
I
series
think
of
there's
glyphs and codex describe Rasputin, so maybe he's just like in the lore of it.
I think there is like there's a side scroller he might be in.
And yeah, Todd McFarlane's it's like toy company made a Rasputin action figure, which I kind of wanted to see. They don't have I'd probably have to Google it, but they don't have an example of them. Some here, like right within the Wikipedia page, and also, apparently one of the theme parks rides in the Magic Kingdom of Walt Disney in Florida and Tokyo Disneyland are both dedicated to Rasputin,
Huh.
which kind of weird.
Yeah, I guess the weirdest thing about the like beyond the turning him into a devil worshiper thing about the Hellboy portrayal is that like I don't know that Rasputin would have been cool with the Nazis because in that movie Rasputin's like literally after he get like comes back from the dead after apparently like in the movie they add that like I think from some exaggerated portrayals of the assassination they also add that Rasputin was castrated in like in the incident,
Hmm.
which I don't know doesn't seem like I don't know if that tracks to the original. I don't think that even tracks to the original Yusupov live.
Yeah.
But yeah, after he comes back from the dead, he ends up working for the Nazis in the Second World War. I don't know that he would have been cool. He would have done that. First of all, Eliodor is the anti-Semitic one. I don't know that you'd necessarily call. I don't know enough to say that Rasputin's good on Jewish relations. He does genuinely like usually speak to the fact that like he does want to benefit the peasantry. At least when he's not, he does get more less stable toward the end of his life. He does a lot more. He ends up he's not supposed to drink, and he starts drinking toward those last couple of years after the war starts. But he, yeah, another like that's one thing. But also the Nazis are very pro-war, and Rasputin seems to be pretty anti-war. I don't know that he like a pacifist may be going too far, and he doesn't like abandon his post when Russia goes into the World War, or more to that, right? Like the first Balkan War, I think is what it was. He doesn't like every time anytime Rasputin was asked about going into a war, Rasputin's answer is no. Like he just thinks that like okay, if you go into the war, it'll hurt the peasantry and it'll be a bad thing. So he's not like really pro-war, which is something you kind of got to be a Nazi. It's like the thing they're second most famous for. Like their big thing is hating Jews. Their second big thing is war. They like war almost as much as they hate Jews. So that's just how that works. But yeah, Rasputin, by all accounts, just seems to be like pretty anti-war. Our third kind of fantastical portrayal I kind of want to talk about is they did a prequel to the Kingsman called The King's Man. I think in 2021 or 2020. This is a movie I didn't think was going to be really good because Rasputin's one of the bad guys in it. To spoil it, he's only like I'm spoiling the movie, but he's only in like the first third to half of it. So if you were expecting him to be the big bad of this movie, he's not. While I'm spoiling it, the big bad is just some guy. Yeah, it's a pretty bad movie. It's a terrible movie. I told Cody not to watch it, actually.
Which I did not. It would have also been one of the first Kingsman movies that I've actually sat down and watched, so I feel like it would have tainted my opinion on them.
It might have done that. It did that for me. It's the only one I've watched, and I thought this was terrible. Word to the wise. Don't open your movie with the admission that the country your guy's got to save in the movie is running a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Like, just that's maybe just a thing. Don't if you open your movie with the heroes of the movie running a concentration camp, maybe you're not gonna be invested in their survival for the rest of the movie. Just an idea. Maybe that's not the way to go about it, and maybe don't. And yeah, no, yeah, that's literally how the movie opens with them like going to one of the original concentration camps that the British used against the Boers. But anyway, about the Rasputin thing. In this movie, in The King's Man, Rasputin has magical powers, and he is working for a grand global conspiracy in order to pull Russia out of the war so that England can be crushed. And presumably France first. Although France isn't mentioned in that entire movie. There's maybe one reference. And it might just be that they're in Versailles signing the Treaty of Versailles at the end of the First World War. Which, yeah, and that's actually relates, like, in that movie, these British secret agents kill Rasputin to prevent him from getting, manipulating the king and queen to pull him out of the war. This is based on, like, an old conspiracy theory from around the time. It was an idea that, like, the British had helped kill Rasputin because he was, anti-war? Yeah, he was anti-war, but he clearly didn't have enough control over Tsar Nicholas to convince him not to go to war. This, like, Tsar Nicholas, like, absolutely just doesn't seem like Tsar. Like, he likes the guy. Seems like he's very much fine with him being around. When like some of his advisors, I think it's maybe the Prime Minister of Russia at the time, asks him to get rid of Rasputin. He's just like, dude, I'd rather put up with 10 Rasputins than have to listen to my wife cry.
Jeez.
And that's just kind of where he's at. Yeah, and granted, that sounds douchey when I said it like that, but the context of this is that he's, this guy is helping cure his son of hemophilia. So, yeah, I'd be a little bit more seriously than it kind of gets brushed off as sometimes. Yeah, no, I'm not. I'd rather deal with him than listen to my wife cry as my son dies, and at which point I will also cry. But he can't say that part out loud because this is a politically sensitive secret, for the reason of that, like, okay, if that just portrays that the Russian lineage is not secure. And that could just be a weakness that some people want to exploit. This movie's based on the old conspiracy theory that the British killed Rasputin, which has evolved from the idea that the British helped kill Rasputin. In fact, none of the Russians even help in this movie. This is very much a movie where the British do everything.
Yeah.
Like there's not one I guess, like, technically the Afro-British butler isn't maybe not count. I don't know what his citizenship is, but yeah, no, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, but yeah, again, I don't know that, like, Rasputin has that kind of pull. I don't know that he could have ever convinced Nicholas to go to war. He did frequently oppose the idea of going to war, probably because Nicholas had lost the last one, like really badly. Like, yeah, he's the first modern European army to lose against an Asian army, so he's kind of an embarrassment to the British to the European aristocracy, because at this point they're all still very racist against Asians. So like they're just like, you got beat by an Asian, that must mean you're a pussy. That's very much the idea here. And yeah, his idea, and then Nicholas wants to come around and go into more wars, which he also fails at. Not like this is World War One. It's terrible. Like this is a war where the Russian army doesn't have a gun for every soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really bad. He performs very badly this entire operation. Like Rasputin, it may sound prophetic that Rasputin says this is going to be bad for Russia, but like it's obvious. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. I don't know that anyone knew it was going to go as badly as it did for the Tsar, but yeah, you can say it's going to go badly. And also, like the Germans do like defeat still do lose after the British leave the war, because the Russians do leave the war after Nicholas loses power in 1917. Yeah, I mean, the key problem with like why Rasputin doesn't get I say a fair shake, but the fair shake is really like, yeah, he's a bit of an asshole, but he's not the biggest asshole in the room. I don't think he really did anything to deserve him getting shot, if I'm being honest. Like whatever bad influence he had on the Russian Empire, it's not like he contributes to the disreputation of the Russian Empire, but I think without him, the blame for all of Russia's mistakes kind of flows onto Nicholas a little bit sooner, if anything. Although that's just speculation, to be fair.
I guess in hindsight, I was gonna say I really don't have any real good understanding of what happens to the German or the Russian Empire after the October Revolution, and I don't also know where the October Revolution took place. So, like, Nikolai is known as like
The
the
funny
last.
thing is November.
Okay, but it's called the October. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the Russians use the Russians at this point are using the wrong calendar.
Sure.
The Russians are one of the last guys to abandon the Julian calendar, so their dates are like a week off, a week and a half off.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, go on.
Well, it's a collapse of a monarchy at this point in time. So what happens to the monarchy of Russia after, I guess, the October Revolution, November Revolution, if you will?
Okay, so...
And I mean, make it as brief as fucking
after,
possible here, but...
Yeah. Okay, so at some point after the Bolsheviks get in charge, the Russians, actually after the abdication, but the end of it happens when the Bolsheviks get in charge. The Romanovs get put under house arrest, basically. Their movements are controlled a bit, and eventually some of the Bolsheviks decide they're going to kill the Romanovs, so they haul the entire core royal family into the basement of the apartments they're living in, and they shoot them. Not just Nicholas and Alexandra, but all 5 of the children.
Okay.
Yeah, that's there are some like more distant relatives who do survive the war. Obviously, Yusupov, but yeah, there are more distant relatives who end up fleeing the country. They're the white Russians who get sent off and end up living in exile for the rest of their lives. One of them, I think, forms a vodka company.
Mm-hmm.
Called Smirnoff.
Okay.
But yeah, so they all die. They meet much the same fate as Rasputin. But yeah, the Soviets will end up looking upon Rasputin is this like sign of the decadent, like the incompetence and decadence of the Romanov family, which is gets to be a thing. The White Russians also don't really like, by and large, don't really like Rasputin because he's a religious radical, and he has an undue influence over the king and queen. So yeah, Rasputin just really doesn't have someone batting in his corner. There's no one's political philosophy revolves around Rasputin being a good guy, actually. Whereas like a lot of other guys would get that treatment, because Rasputin has philosophies. I don't know if you'd call him like a thought leader. Like he's got his, I guess you could maybe call it a cult. He's got followers, but he's not like that major a political figure. And also the aristocracy doesn't necessarily like him because he is a peasant. There are just like things that like they just kind of look down on him because he. There are just moments where like he acts away because he is a peasant, and though that way to acting is actually pretty typical of Russian Siberian peasants of that era, it would have been looked down upon quite a bit by the other aristocracy. I think there's actually an example of like some of the aristocracy would report, as if in Scandal, that like Rasputin was attempting these mixed gender bathhouses, which were actually perfectly common among the peasantry, but was not something that was done by the aristocracy. And yeah, and Rasputin did just get, he was really close with the family. He was constantly visiting. He did he was around, like it is noted that he was around the Russian princesses when they were like in nightgowns, which is, I mean, not as maybe inappropriate as maybe you like it could be imagined, but is considered a good bit out of reach for somebody who's not a family member. And I think he did vaguely get into that category toward his time with them. He was very close to them, and a lot of people just didn't understand why. And it's certainly understandable why they did it. These people were, the Romanovs were already somewhat, like I said, they were like favored religious radicals, and they were also somewhat vulnerable to faith healers during the birth of one of their daughters. They had a French miracle worker in their court trying to get them to help them give birth to a male child before Alexei was born, and eventually that guy just has a big hiccup and he's kicked right out of court, which is something that doesn't happen to Rasputin because he's got this really good in. So he can't be expelled, and the Tsar isn't going to expel him. He's like Nicholas definitely isn't. I think you can argue that like Alexandra was maybe enthralled with him, not like magically, but like in a way that like if you're really into your preacher, which if you know people who are really into their preachers, you'll understand. That's certainly a fair like speculation. Nicholas is less so, but I think he does appreciate like Rasputin's presence, even if he doesn't listen to his every word like Alexandra does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about. But yeah, a lot of like again, a lot of like his like a lot of the stuff he actually did wrong was like mismanage some aspects of the Russian Empire, which the Romanovs were already doing, and scamming the Romanovs, which I don't consider actually a crime. Honestly, he was probably doing something. If like it seems like he was doing Alexei a favor at least. He did some kindness to that small child, which is worth something. He was absolutely like had some problems with like being a little bit too close to a lot of women. There are a few allegations of a sexual assault in there. I don't know if they were the norm, but they are out there. Some of them could easily be true. This type of guy does do that sort of thing, but it's not necessarily as bad. Like there are lots of guys in the czarist ecosystem that are doing the exact same thing that we don't give nearly as much shit. Although I'm not saying don't give him shit, but like, yeah, he again, like I said at the beginning, he's a bad guy. He's not the bad guy. And again, I just like, again with the Magnola thing, I don't know, like readily I would be willing to like use him as like, oh, this shady guy that's like actually evil and like is manipulating the Romanovs, because frankly, if anything, he was against like he was against the war. He's not the most anti-Semitic of the religious advisors of the Romanovs. He's not like this idea that he's like influencing the worst aspects of the monarchy. It's just probably ahistorical 90% of the time. And yeah, like he's I think it like it's like, again, I'll reference that Encyclopedia Britannica article I was reading. That very much is like that article gives, I think, Rasputin and also Alexandra way too much credit about like who's really responsible for the problems in Russia. Using Rasputin can be like a way of like, oh well, without him, the Romanovs would have still been able to survive, and they would have made a lot better decisions, which is probably not the true. Like a lot of his worst decisions, Nicholas's worst decisions, were made against the grain of Rasputin. And by those worst decisions, I mean the war, honestly. And some guy in like some movies portray the guys killing Rasputin as more revolutionary than they actually were, or reform-minded than they actually were. By all accounts, the Rasputin's assassins are a lot more conservative than him, or even Heliodor, for that matter.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we're doing next. Did you have something you wanted to do next for this?
Probably, but I'll have to get back to you on something. Sure.
Alrighty then. Yeah, this has been the PoliSciFiPod. We're not like, make sure to follow, like, subscribe to the YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and leave good reviews. Comment, subscribe.
To find us on any of the podcast platforms, you're gonna have to search up our original podcast, Kyle and Cody's Called Cinemacast.
Right.
Not at PoliSciFi. You can find us on YouTube at PoliSciFi.
Yeah, you might still be able to find it, but yeah.
I haven't looked into that at all.
Yeah, you might still be able to find it, but yeah. Oh yeah, if you like, at least on Spotify, if you look up PoliSciFiPod, it brings us up. Yeah, so remember, we're not here to explain why it works. We're just here to explain what happened.